Hey guys, welcome back. Today we'll see the primitives and their object counterparts. So in JavaScript we have primitives like null, undefined, string, number or boolean. And similarly for string, number and boolean we have wrapper objects which are instances of the string, number or boolean constructors, but not for nulls and undefined. So before proceeding further, let's see the major difference between primitives and objects. So in a simple sense we can say primitives will have no properties while objects will have properties, and again the properties can be primitives or object references like arrays or object literals. Let's see the example. Did you ever wondered why we have these many kinds of notations to create any value? So let's see, I am creating a string. In these three statements the strings are created, but there is subtle difference among them. So let's see, a is a plain string. It's a primitive value of string, while b is a value returned by the string function and c is a reference to the string object. So let me print this out. See, it's very clear. The a is of type string, b is of type string, while c is of type object. So see here what is happening. This is self-explanatory. In this case, in the second statement, the string function can be used to convert non-string values to string. So if we pass any string, there is no difference. But in this case, when we are using constructor with new keyword, see, when a function is called with new keyword, that means it will be treated as constructor because always it will return new object instance. Whereas if you are calling the same constructor function without new, means it will be a plain function, no object will be returned. So that's the difference. So let's see. So out of these three statements, these two are similar because anyway this function also returns the plain string. So a and b will be same and c will be something different because it will hold the reference to the new object. So going forward I will be comparing a and c, and because a and b are same, at least in this case, because we are passing string and it will return the string. So if we pass any different value, in that case the return value can be different, but in this example both we can think of a and b as same. So let's see how a and c behaves differently while accessing existing properties. I want to highlight some points here. See, I am calling two uppercase function on a is a primitive, and again I am accessing the length property of a and c. So let me execute the statement. See, we are not seeing any problem with this. A dot to uppercase function is successfully called and value is transformed, and a dot length, again we are able to access the length property, and for c also we are able to access the length property. But few minutes back we discussed like primitives have no properties. That means primitive cannot have any properties or even methods also. But how we are able to, how these statements are legal? Even if primitives don't have any properties, but when we access any property, when you try to access any method or property of the primitive, JavaScript internally typecast them to corresponding wrapper objects. So in this case what will happen, a is of string type, so that's why while we access the method or property, it will typecast it to string wrapper object. So the statement internally something like this. new string of a dot to uppercase. So similarly here also what is happening when we are accessing length property, even though the primitive string, the primitive value has no length property associated with it, but while accessing it internally converts the string to corresponding wrapper object of string type. So all the methods and the properties available on the string object will be available with this variable. So that's why we are getting length. And for C it's obvious anyway, it's a string object, so length is present and we can access that. So that's just the takeaway from this point is the main benefit of converting string or converting any primitive value to its wrapper object. That means on the fly we can access all the properties and methods of that corresponding value. Okay, let's move on to the second aspect. Setting new properties or methods to a wrapper object and to a primitive, how it will affect. See, we can clearly see that a is the primitive value while C is a wrapper object. So let's say I am overriding the length property. The length property we were earlier printed and we got 6 because the name has 6 characters. So now I am trying to override that length with 10 and I am trying to add a new property called info to that variable. So when we are printing this and when we are doing the same thing for the wrapper object also, let's see the difference. See what is happening. Even though I have overridden the length here 10, still we are getting 6 only, and even if I have added the new property info, still I am getting undefined. Let's discuss these points. Why? Because as we discussed it, when we will access any property through the primitive value, a temporary wrapper object will be created, and so the temporary wrapper object's length is overridden, and once the statement execution is complete, the temporary object will be deleted by our garbage collector because there is no reference to the temporary object exist. So that's why even though length is not overridden, it's giving the old value, still it's not an error because it's a legal statement, because this value is a typecasting into wrapper object and we are assessing the length of that temporary wrapper object and we are assigning, but we don't have the way to print this or reuse that right now. So that's why we are not able to see. Similarly, in this case, what is happening? Here again another temporary object, wrapper object is creating and we are appending or adding info field to that, and as soon as this statement's execution is completed, again the temporary wrapper object gets removed from the memory. So in this point when we are printing, again here another new temporary wrapper object is creating. Here also the same case. So that's why this is a new object. Here a new object has been created and deleted. Here also new object has been created and deleted. Here also new object has been created and we have printed the values. So that's why here we are not getting the info field undefined, and the length is always based upon the value of a. That's the case. So similarly, but with the wrapper object the thing is little different. See, for wrapper object we are getting 6 and the field value. That means what is happening, C is a reference to the wrapper object here we have created. So to that wrapper object's length we have overridden the length by 25. Similarly, we have added another field info, which is this is the test info. So while I am printing the length and info, both have printed, but length didn't change, only info has been changed. Why? It leads to something new concept called in JavaScript, every object properties will have certain attributes. Those attributes will decide the nature of the property. Let's say there are writable attributes, that means the attribute value can be overridden. Similarly, configurable, that means the configuration can be changed, something like. So for that I have added these two statements to show you. Let's see. Let's print the attribute properties of length and info properties of this C object. So see, so what it says, the length property is writable false, enumerable false, and configurable false. These things we can discuss in my further videos. So right now we are focusing on writable. So writable false means the value cannot be overridden. So that's why even if I'm assigning 25, it's showing still the 6. The 25 is not overridden. And in strict mode it will give us an error. It's now I'm not using any strict here, so that's why it's silently failing. And similarly for c.info, see the difference. Info is writable true, so that's why we were able to override. So I hope you are clear. Okay, so the takeaway is, when we want to override the values of any of the properties of primitive value, so what will happen, it will not affect the primitive value, it will always affect the temporarily created wrapper object in that statement, so which will immediately deleted after execution of that statement. So that's it. Let's move on to the next aspect. Let me comment this. So the next point I want to highlight, what will happen when we use wrapper objects with primitive values. So let's see. Explain. Let's see. I'm creating a temporary string using C, which is a wrapper object we already with value Sudhir, and I'm concatenating with primitive value. So it's a wrapper object and it's a primitive value. So what JavaScript does, whenever a whenever a wrapper object is used with primitive values, internally value of function will be called, which will convert that object to primitive value. So in this case, the C will be replaced by its value of function, which will return Sudhir, because that value is Sudhir. So Sudhir plus Kumar, so we will see the Sudhir Kumar as output. See, it's returning Sudhir. We can verify it. Let's say I'm overriding the value of function with any new function. Let's say it returns a string like something test string, suppose. So now see the result. See, test string Kumar. So the value of C is test string. That means in this case also it's called this operation is called value of function, and which return the test string value, and that test string value is appended with this Kumar. Okay, the concept is same for other two types also, numbers and boolean. Let's see this code snippet. Let's say I have three kinds of numbers. One is plain value, another one value returned by number function, and third one is the object wrapper. So anyway, as I told you earlier, this function can be used to convert non-number values to numbers, and this can be, you can refer my earlier video on this. This will return the reference to the wrapper object. So let's say n1 is plain value, I mean primitive value. When we are calling n1 dot to exponential, that means what, we are accessing the method of number object. So how? Because this plain value is converted to wrapper object internally and we are accessing, so that we are able to access this function. And similarly, when we are using this, see, n3 is here wrapper object. When we are using wrapper object with primitive values, just like in case of string, here also the value of function will be called. So that's why to test it, I have added n3. I have overridden the value of function of n3, which will return 1000. So instead of 17, it will be interpreted as 1000 in this case. Let's see. See, we are getting this is okay. We are getting the exponential value successfully, and here also instead of 17 plus 20 37, we are getting 1020 because I have overridden the value of function. So this is just to make you clear that every time when we are using a wrapper object with primitive value, it always the value of function will be called. If I comment it out, then the results will be normal. See, 37. So that's it guys. I will be leaving this source code link in my description and with other references also.